There's a couple interesting Nintendo Switch stories we need to talk about today, starting with the ongoing Nintendo Switch DRM situation that broke earlier last week, and now we have an official response from the company behind the technology and how it'll be utilized on the Switch. Then the big talking point for today's video has to do with Nintendo and their response to the ongoing inflation situation, as recently we got an announcement that Sony will be raising their console prices, and we have to go over Nintendo's direct comments in response to this situation right now. What's up, Nation? If it's your first time on the channel, make sure you join Sunbro Nation by subscribing below. Hit the like button on this video if you enjoy it today, and make sure you turn on your bell notification icon so you're kept up to date with all the newest gaming news. Now, as I mentioned, guys, we are breaking down a couple different stories today, and we have to kick it off with an update to a video that we made on the channel last week discussing Denuvo, aka a DRM technology that is notorious online for slowing down performance of games that would otherwise be running much better. Slower frame rates, slower load times, and even things like online checks being enabled, basically forcing you to be online, connected to the internet in order to ensure that you have a legal copy of a game. And yes, while the motivation behind this tool comes from a good place, meaning developers keep the money in their pockets and it is to ultimately fight piracy, it has so many issues that come along with it that really it is a bad move to enable on games when it comes down to the end user experience. And there was a lot of people covering this and speaking out about it, saying that the Nintendo Switch already suffers from performance issues. We are running off of a Tegra X1 on this thing, which is clearly a dated graphics processing unit, and if we're talking about things like lower frame rates and longer load times than what we have right now, this could be a very big problem. And we do have at this point in time an official response from Denuvo themselves, or I guess that's the brand of this DRM technology, so the company name is actually Erdito, if I'm saying that right. But to get on the same page with what their response has been around the situation with all the coverage it's been getting, let's quickly hop over to Nintendo Everything and read through this article together. Denuvo responds to concerns about its new Switch DRM initiative. Denuvo announced new DRM plans for Switch earlier this week, and a spokesperson has now followed up by responding to some of the concerns people have raised. First, the company said the program came about due to strong demand from publishing partners, though Nintendo had no involvement. It's also claimed that in-game performance will not be impacted. Because of NDAs, we are not allowed to disclose company names, but we can say this solution comes from strong demand from publishing partners. Software publishers and Denuvo take great care to deliver the best gaming experience. The protection is designed to not affect the gamer's experience, and it does not have any in-game performance impact. It is the same for this new solution when protection is only active in non-performance critical code parts. Denuvo also noted that DRM won't ask players for online checks. We are aware that the Nintendo Switch is a mobile console and therefore has limited online capabilities, so we designed our solution to be fully offline, no online checks required. One area that will be impacted is emulation. According to Denuvo, its DRM will restrict use of legally purchased games with Switch emulators on PC. So I guess the one for sure positive takeaway from this is that we don't have to worry about online checks, at least according to their PR spokesperson, and it really would not make sense to have any kind of online check system with a hybrid console like the Switch, where yes, you may be playing it at home on Wi-Fi or plugged in through your Ethernet port on the OLED dock, or maybe you have the adapter, but 9 times out of 10, you want to have the freedom just to throw it in your bag wherever you're going and traveling, and that is a lot of the convenience factor around the Switch. So to lock games behind an online check system on a console like this would make zero sense, and I'm sure that Nintendo fans would have been outraged if that was the case. So that is the biggest positive from this article, essentially confirming that we don't have to worry about that. However, with the performance piece of things, of course they are going to say it doesn't hamper in-game performance. That is what they say about their PC performance, but unfortunately the user tests that are out there absolutely confirm that frame rates do drop, load times do take longer, and you just have an overall downgrade in gameplay performance, in addition to bigger file sizes, which when we're talking about physical game collectors and cartridges could be an issue as well. Not to mention the Switch doesn't have a ton of storage, so that's another side issue, but we will ultimately have to wait and see how this is implemented. It does sound like it's all primarily third-party driven at this point, with probably a lot of publishers and third-party developers being very frustrated that when putting all of their time and effort into these games, that they can essentially be played on a PC emulator and unfortunately pirated online in a lot of cases, and they are are absolutely looking into this tech to mitigate that problem and essentially save them revenue, which does make sense. But at the end of the day, this is a wait and see scenario with how this is ultimately rolled out. This is not something that will be a flip switch and all of the games automatically come with DRM protection. That would be a big problem, and that is not this scenario. So with this official response, it is still not a good news story by any means, and we can still potentially see some big issues arise from this, but it is at least some confirmation that we don't have to worry about, in my opinion, what would have been the crippling feature of this technology, which is the online check portion. So I want to hear from you guys in the comments down below, all your personal thoughts and feelings around this DRM situation with Switch and Denuvo, and what games and publishers going forward do you think will utilize this tech, and do you think we'll ever see Nintendo hop on board with their first party titles, potentially making it a system-wide thing? I don't see it going that route, but it definitely could. So please share all your thoughts and feelings on the latest update to the Denuvo DRM Nintendo Switch situation in the comments down below. Now, the other story we're talking about today is an interesting one because it has to do with consoles being well into their current life cycles and us consumers having to worry about the potential for price increases, not decreases like you normally see after consoles are sold and available on the market for a while, but rather worry about whether or not we have to pay more for the same existing hardware that is being sold today. And you're probably no stranger to the conversation of inflation and component shortages and the chip shortage overall that we have been going through in the current environment. But this is back in the news in a big way because, of course, recently Sony actually released an official press statement that they will be raising the price of the PlayStation 5 in essentially all major markets except the US, which you can maybe argue is due to the strength of the US dollar right now, but you also have to wonder if they're just kind of picking their markets because maybe they see the US as a bigger, more important market that might react more poorly to this decision. But at the end of the day, it's kind of a gross thing to see a multi-billion-dollar company pass on their most likely temporary struggles to the end consumer, where you could absolutely see that they would have ways to eat that cost and not pass it on to the end consumer. But that is what they are choosing to do in major markets. We also had an interesting story that we briefly talked about on the channel where the Oculus Quest, Meta Quest, whatever it's called now, 2 is being sold and available. It's been on the market for at least a few years now, and that got a full $100 price increase announced for its SKUs, which is like, okay, what world are we living in where the technology that we already could buy at one point in time, and tech, you know how fast it ages and moves forward, now we're going to pay more for the same thing? And that's happened now on both Sony's fronts and Meta/Oculus with its Quest 2 device, causing a lot of alarms to go off, and journalists reaching out to representatives at Microsoft, representatives at Nintendo, wanting to know, is this going to be an industry-wide thing now? Because we're seeing it happen in so many different consumer electronics. Are game consoles across the board next? And fortunately for us Nintendo Switch fans, we do have a good news story around this. And to quickly get on the same page with how Nintendo has responded to this situation, let's quickly hop over to VGC and read through their detailed typed up article together. Nintendo says it has no plans to increase Switch prices. Company shares statement after Sony raised PS5 prices. Citing the challenging global economic environment, on Thursday, Sony said it had made the difficult decision to raise PS5 prices in Europe, Japan, and parts of North America. Microsoft subsequently told VGC that it doesn't intend to raise Xbox prices, and Nintendo has now told us that it also has no plans to increase the price of its hardware. The company's UK arm provided VGC with the following statement. As our president, Mr. Furukawa, stated at the 82nd Annual General Meeting of Shareholders in June, while we cannot comment on pricing strategies, we currently do not have any plans to change the price of our hardware due to inflation or increased procurement costs in each country. We will determine our future pricing strategies through careful and continued deliberations. While the final price to consumers is always determined by retailers, as Mr. Furukawa stated, Nintendo has no plans to increase the trade price of its hardware. So I do think, obviously, that this is the right decision from Nintendo to not intend to increase any kind of cost to the consumer for their Switch hardware. I also think it's the logical decision to make because when we're talking about a base model Switch that has now been sold for well over 5 years, if you imagine the kind of blowback that Sony is getting right now with their decision, imagine if we're talking about the base model Switch going up to $350 across the board, and then the OLED goes up to $400, and we're still talking about that same Tegra X1 base processor that's been in there since 2015 when that was developed. Like, yes, the consumer backlash would be absolutely terrible for Nintendo, and the reality is that these companies have multiple revenue streams, so while the component shortage may be a big hurdle for them currently and affecting their bottom line profit margin in their business, I do think from a long-term perspective it is very important not to make an anti-consumer move where you do just charge the end consumer more when you could have made it up in software and subscription services, things like PlayStation Plus that Sony is making so much revenue off of. Not to mention they had a lawsuit recently against them for how high their rates are in terms of the percentages that they take from the PlayStation Store from all sales, and so you want to pull revenue from those aspects of your business and not the end consumer's wallet for existing hardware that now you look back and you realize that, wait a minute, the PlayStation 5 at launch was technically on sale now in many markets because it just went up in price. So hopefully we don't have to worry about this stuff too much longer, and we can talk about things decreasing in price with price slashes like we historically see with console life cycles, or what I am ready to pay more money for is something like a more powerful revision of the Nintendo Switch, or just the true next gen console whenever Nintendo has that ready to go for us. But I want to hear from you guys at this point in the video on both the different stories we talked about today. How are you feeling about the DRM Denuvo situation with the Nintendo Switch, and how do you think it'll be implemented going forward? And definitely share your thoughts with me on Nintendo confirming that it intends to sell the Switch at its current price point and not inflate any prices like we saw Sony do with the PS5 line of consoles. And bonus question, do you think that is a truthful statement, or do you think that this is something that, while they say they don't intend to, 6 months down the road from now we could turn around and see them actually pivot and do that decision anyway? So regardless of your thoughts and feelings on everything we talked about today, I do look forward to hearing from you all in the comments down below before you leave the video, as I do look forward to getting a back and forth conversation started with you all around these topics. Go watch Friday's video next if you haven't already, where we discuss a brand new record that Zelda Breath of the Wild 2 just established in the Zelda franchise as a whole, as well as a historical look at the development time of all the different major Zelda games that were released. Also, make sure you like, subscribe, turn on your notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.